Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are cracking open a really specific, but I think incredibly insightful document.
Which is?
It's the examiner's report for the ACCA Advanced Audit and Assurance exam, that's AAA, from September and December 2024.
Ah, right. And our mission with this deep dive really is to cut straight to the heart of it. We want to pull out the most important, nuggets of knowledge, insights from the marking process itself.
Exactly.
Think of it like getting a direct feed from the people who actually scored the papers. Seeing exactly where candidates did well, where they consistently stumbled.
Yeah.
And getting that crucial advice. Useful for anyone tackling this exam, or frankly, anyone interested in the finer details of advanced audit.
Totally agree. And our only source today is that official examiner's report. So whether you're maybe deep in study for this exam yourself, or perhaps you're just curious about the nuances of advanced auditing practice, or you're simply fascinated by what separates, a strong performance from a weaker one in these high-level professional exams, this deep dive is definitely for you.
Okay, then.
Okay, let's unpack this report and see what we can learn.
So the report kicks off by explaining its purpose, and it's purely constructive, they say. It's there to provide guidance based on real observations from marking, thousands of scripts.
Yeah, it's not just a score list.
No, exactly. It's feedback on performance trends, what they're seeing across the board.
And they're really clear about how you should actually use this report too, aren't they? It's not meant for passive reading.
Definitely not.
The examiner says you absolutely must use this alongside the published sample exam on the ACCA practice platform. Attempt those questions first,
right?
Then review the published answers, and then use this report to understand the anatomy of good and bad answers. It's the why behind the score, really.
Precisely. It's all about active learning. And right up front, the report flags a crucial skill, something that consistently impacted performance. And interestingly, it's not technical at all.
Oh, what's that?
Time management.
Ah, okay. Always critical in exams.
Highlighted as absolutely essential for success, it suggests many candidates just ran out of steam or maybe time before finishing properly.
That makes sense. What's fascinating here, I thought, is that the report pinpoints significant knowledge gaps, and not always in the brand new AAA material, but in what they call assumed knowledge.
Assumed knowledge, so things they should already know.
Exactly. Things that should be solid from earlier stages.
Yeah.
Like materiality, figuring out if a mistake is big enough to actually influence decisions, or ethical principles, fundamental auditor reporting.
Core stuff.
And the report noted that answers in these foundational areas were often surprisingly weak, just not at the level expected for AAA.
Wow. That raises a really important point then about building blocks, doesn't it?
It does.
The report strongly suggests candidates aren't always building sufficiently on their prior knowledge, from those earlier applied skills papers in audit and assurance and financial reporting.
And SBR too.
Strategic business reporting, yeah. Practice is essential, obviously, but it needs to be practice that reinforces and applies all that cumulative knowledge, not just the new AAA topics in isolation.
It sounds like those earlier subjects are less like hurdles you just clear and forget.
Right.
And more like the actual bedrock AAA is built upon.
Right.
The report also offers a really practical suggestion, connecting theory to practice. Looking at real-world auditors' reports.
Yes, absolutely. They recommend reviewing published auditors' reports for listed companies, particularly focusing on the Key Audit Matters section, the CAMs.
Why specifically that section?
Because it shows you exactly how auditors articulate significant risks in the real world and how they link them to the audit response they carried out. It can make those, sometimes abstract concepts feel much more tangible.
Good tip.
And for those really focused on scoring, the report does mention that detailed info on how the professional skills marks are awarded for AAA is available separately. That's another key piece of the puzzle for understanding performance.
Right. Okay. Let's shift gears then and dive into the specifics of the questions themselves, starting with the heavyweight, question 1, called Heart. This was the big 50-mark question in Section A.
Yeah, the big one. And this question, according to the report, was a significant challenge for candidates. A major hurdle seemed to be its integrated nature.
Integrated, meaning?
Meaning information you needed for one part might have been buried in a completely different exhibit within the scenario. Candidates really struggled, it seems, to weave together information from across the different parts of the scenario.
The classic exam technique, making you connect the dots across multiple pages. Not always easy under pressure.
Definitely not. And it seems like faced with that complexity, many candidates sort of retreated into generic answers.
Instead of applying it.
Exactly. Instead of taking the specific facts of the heart scenario and applying their knowledge to those facts.
That lack of specific application sounds like a recurring theme already.
It is. And as we mentioned earlier, poor time management just made this worse in question 1. Candidates spent too long, perhaps, on the initial parts and simply didn't leave enough time to tackle the later requirements adequately.
Okay, let's break down the requirements within question 1. Requirement A asked about audit risks. How did candidates do there?
The report noted they actually did reasonably well here in identifying relevant risks. So they could spot potential problems, red flags in the scenario.
Okay, so they could spot them.
But the weaknesses lay in the crucial next steps. They often failed to clearly link those identified risks to specific financial statement assertions.
Assertions like existence or valuation completeness.
Precisely those. And candidates also sometimes listed generic business risks, like, a company faces competition instead of actual audit risks, which are risks of material misstatement in the financials. And critically, many didn't fully explain the impact on the financial statements or articulate the necessary auditor's response to that specific risk in the context of heart. It was often a partial answer, leaving key bits out.
Right, got it. Okay, moving to requirement B, which covered ethical and professional issues in the scenario. What did the report say about performance here?
Performance was quite mixed, it seems. The stronger answers did exactly what was needed. They identified specific ethical threats relevant to heart, the scenario company.
Like self-interest threats.
Yeah, things like self-interest or maybe self-review, fee dependence threats, or other key professional issues. And then, crucially, they didn't just name the threat.
They linked it.
They recommended appropriate safeguards specifically tailored and applied to the facts of the heart scenario. That application was key.
And the weaker answers.
Well, they were just sort of generic discussions of ethical principles, maybe listing some threats, but without making that vital connection back to the case study itself.
Okay, now requirement C asks for substantive procedures. And the report highlighted this as a section that was poorly answered. Why was this such a struggle, do you think?
Well, this is where that generic problem really seemed to hit hard again. Instead of proposing specific audit tests designed to address the particular risks or account balances in the heart scenario, many candidates just provided a general shopping list of standard procedures.
Like stuff straight out of a textbook.
Pretty much. Things you might find anywhere. The report noted specific errors, like not stating the objective of the procedure, what exactly is this test trying to prove,
Right.
or failing to link the procedure back to a specific account balance or assertion that was relevant to the risks in the heart scenario.
So it wasn't about not knowing any procedures, but not knowing which specific ones to apply and why in this situation.
Exactly that. The tailoring was missing.
And requirement D on quality control and review procedures. The report notes this was also generally poorly answered.
Yes, candidates seemed less prepared for this one. They struggled to identify quality control procedures that were genuinely relevant to the heart scenario, and particularly, they couldn't clearly outline the specific areas an engagement quality control reviewer would likely focus on.
The EQCR.
Yeah.
The independent review partner.
Right. What would that specific person be looking for, given the context of this audit? Candidates struggled to articulate that.
That's a key senior role in practice, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it makes sense the exam would test awareness of it.
It does.
The report also clarified how professional skills marks were awarded for question 1. Can you remind us?
Correct. Marks were given for skepticism, so, questioning information, challenging assumptions or inconsistencies presented in the scenario. Analysis and evaluation was key for linking those identified risks to assertions and proposing logical, appropriate audit responses.
Makes sense.
And then communication marks were for the overall clarity, structure, and importantly, conciseness of how candidates presented their entire answer for question 1.
So it's really testing the complete auditor skill set, isn't it? Not just technical recall.
Absolutely. The whole package.
All right, let's move into section B then. Starting with question 2, Oak, worth 25 marks. Requirement A here was quite specific, asking for audit procedures related to a change in accounting framework.
Yes, this presented a specific challenge. Candidates needed to propose procedures specifically for a company transitioning from, say, a national GAAP generally accepted accounting principles to IFRS, the International Financial Reporting Standards.
Okay, so a transition audit.
Right. But what often happened, according to the report, was candidates gave generic procedures for accepting a new audit client.
Oh, that's different.
Completely different kettle of fish. They missed the specific procedures needed because of the change in framework itself, verifying opening balances under IFRS, checking adjustments, consistency, that kind of thing.
So again, not tailoring the procedures to the precise situation asked for.
Ah.
How about requirement B, that dealt with matters for component auditors?
This was an area where candidates generally performed quite well, the report says.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Many correctly identified the key planning matters that need to be communicated to the auditors of components within a group structure.
Such as?
Things like setting appropriate component materiality levels, identifying significant risks relevant at the component level, and ensuring ethical requirements are understood and adhered to across the entire group audit team.
Good to see. Candidates were strong in that area. It's important for group audits. But then requirement C, focusing on subsequent events and their impact on the audit report. How did that go?
This seemed to be more of a stumbling block again. Candidates often gave very generic information about subsequent events in general.
You mean defining them?
Yeah, defining them, talking about adjusting versus non-adjusting events in theory. But they failed to properly apply this knowledge to the specific subsequent events described in the Oak scenario.
The crucial bit.
And crucially, explaining the precise impact those specific events would have on the final auditor's report. Would it require an adjustment to the financials, just a disclosure, or maybe even a modification to the audit opinion itself? That link was often missing.
There's that theme again, application, and linking it all the way through to the audit report. Okay, let's look at the final question then. Question 3, Bodine, also 25 marks. Requirement A, focused on going concern matters.
Right. For this part, many candidates were actually able to list a good range of factors that can indicate a going concern issue.
So they knew the potential warning signs.
They knew the general theory, yes. Things that might cast doubt on a company's ability to continue operating for the foreseeable future. However, the report noted that some struggled to properly link these general factors to the specific financial pressures and circumstances described for Bodine in the scenario.
So they knew the checklist, maybe, but didn't connect it firmly to the facts provided in this case.
That seems to be the gist of it, yes.
Okay. Requirement B asked about the auditor's going concern responsibilities and procedures. How about that?
This section was reasonably well answered, the report suggests. Many candidates correctly outline the auditor's responsibilities when assessing going concern risk.
And the procedures.
And they were generally able to list common audit procedures performed in this area. Things like reviewing management's cash flow forecasts, reading board minutes for discussions about financing, inquiring with lawyers, that sort of thing.
So the standard approach was fairly well understood.
It seems candidates have prepared pretty well on the standard approach here, yes.
But I sense a but coming. Mirroring question 2C, requirement C here, which asked about the impact of going concern issues on the audit report, seemed to be another area where candidates struggled.
Yes. Definitely. Similar problem. Candidates often found it difficult to explain the specific impact on the auditor's report under the different scenarios presented in the question.
For example,
distinguishing clearly between a situation where there's adequate disclosure of a material uncertainty leading to an unmodified opinion, but with a material uncertainty related to going concern paragraph.
Right.
Versus a situation where the issue is so fundamental or disclosure is inadequate that it represents a pervasive misstatement requiring a modified audit opinion, like an adverse or disclaimer.
So getting the reporting implications right for different fact patterns was tricky.
Very tricky, it seems. They often defaulted back to generic explanations rather than applying the specific facts about Bodine's situation to determine the required reporting outcome.
Okay, so pulling all of these observations from the examiner's report together now, what are the absolute key takeaways for someone studying for this exam or just trying to get to grips with advanced audit challenges?
I think the most consistent, the most critical message woven throughout this entire report is the non-negotiable need to apply your knowledge. Apply it to the specific scenario right there in front of you.
Not just state the theory.
Exactly. Generic descriptions of theory, while they demonstrate some knowledge, they're just not enough at this AAA level. You absolutely must show how the principles interact with the unique facts of the case given.
And it's clear that certain core areas, those ones flagged as assumed knowledge, like ethics and reporting fundamentals, plus substantive procedures, quality control, and especially nailing the impact on the auditor's report in various situations, these remain significant challenges. They need focused revision and, importantly, practice.
Absolutely. And within audit risk specifically, that chain of logic is just vital.
Yeah.
Identify the factor, link it clearly to the specific financial statement assertion it impacts, explain the consequence for the financial statements, and then propose a tailored auditor response.
Just spotting a risk isn't the full answer.
Not even close. It's only the starting point.
Quality control and review procedures too, particularly understanding what an engagement quality control reviewer, the EQCR, is actually looking for. That seems like a definite area for candidates to spend more time on based on this report.
The report certainly highlights a weakness there, yeah. And also the ability to identify and perform procedures that are genuinely tailored to unique situations like that change in accounting framework we discussed, versus just a standard new client acceptance that's a skill that needs dedicated practice.
You can't just rely on a generic template.
No. And we have to mention it again because the report does so repeatedly. Time management. It's flagged right across the board as a critical factor influencing overall performance. Knowing the material isn't enough if you can't demonstrate that knowledge effectively under pressure and within those strict time limits.
It really seems the core challenge at this level, then, is bringing together all the pieces. The technical knowledge, the professional skepticism, and crucially, the ability to apply it accurately and efficiently to a complex, often integrated scenario.
That sums it up pretty well, I think.
So what does this deep dive into the ACCA AAA examiner's report ultimately tell us? Well, it seems crystal clear that success isn't just about memorizing audit standards or procedures lists.
Definitely not.
It's fundamentally about the ability to take that knowledge, apply it rigorously to a specific, often quite messy, real-world style situation.
Right.
It's about piecing together information from different sources and then articulating the consequences, the so what, for the financial statements, the audit process itself, and crucially, that final audit report.
Yeah, the exam seems to be a powerful test of moving beyond just a checklist mentality. It forces you to engage in critical synthetic thinking within a specific context, which is, exactly what advanced audit practice demands day to day.
It really is. And here's where it gets, I think, really interesting to ponder. How much does this widespread struggle that candidates seem to face, applying knowledge, connecting disparate pieces of information, working under intense time pressure in the exam, how much does that mirror the very real day-to-day challenges auditors face out there? When they have to apply complex auditing standards in the often fragmented, pressured, and sometimes messy reality of diverse client situations.
That's a great question. It suggests the exam, for all its pressures, might actually be reflecting a genuine professional challenge. Perhaps this deep dive encourages you, the listener, to not just, read the rules or study the standards, but to really dedicate your practice time to applying them. Pushing yourself constantly to move beyond generic answers and really grapple with the specifics of different facts and figures, different scenarios, because that seems to be where the real learning and the marks are.
Well said. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the ACCA AAA Examiner's Report.